to almost the last event of the first level of NIM Shipyard. So this is going to be a non-mandatory event. You don't need to participate in this one, but it's going to be fun, if I do say so myself. So NIM Shipyard is our shot at educating people about privacy in a somewhat comprehensive way, and that would never be complete without bringing the rest of the picture, other than NIM, also on board. So on that note, I would like to introduce our participants for today. I have Alan Scott with me from Railgun DAO. Hey. Also Kenny Lee from Manta. It's a question whether Kenny's an intern or a CEO based on his Twitter profile. Which one is it, Kenny?
Neither.
All right, cool.
Just co-founder.
Co-founder and CEO and intern, right? Correct?
Just co-founder. Definitely not CEO, and probably not an intern.
All right,
There's
now
three of
that
us.
we have that out of the way.
Yeah, I'm more on the operations side. Victor is the CEO.
It's good to have you, Kenny. I also have with me Jaya, who you probably already know from our opening ceremony. Jaya is named CSO. And also have with me Huxian, who's a community OG and core contributor. And also myself, Sudo, aka Simon. I'm head of community at NIM. And also Evan Macmillan will be joining us, hopefully, from Disco. She's running a bit late, but hopefully she'll be joining us. Now, what we thought would be a good first step, because not everybody may know all of the participants, is maybe to do a roundtable and introduce especially Kenny and Ellen, who our community does not know yet, probably. Starting with you, Ellen.
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. I'm Alan. I'm one of the contributors for the Railgun Privacy Project. I'm very lovingly called the janitor. I just do everything that's not development. My whole goal and mission is to try to do as much stuff that is not development related as possible to keep the devs deving. So when people say devs do something, I'm trying to facilitate that as much as humanly possible. Railgun Project is a smart contract based privacy wallet infrastructure. So it allows you to take and make a private EOA within a smart contract. And abstract away all of the things that are doxing you while you're doing DeFi interactions.
Sorry, Alan, what's an EOA? Just for the noobs here.
Wallet. We'll just say wallet. Thanks.
Thanks for that intro. What about you, Kenny?
Yeah, I'm Kenny. I'm one of the co-founders of Manta, neither the CEO nor the janitor, but somewhere near in between. Manta Network is a protocol specifically focused around ZK primitives. And so we have two networks right now. One is Manta Pacific, which enables ZK as a service for easier development for ZK-enabled applications. And then Manta Atlantic, which is a privacy-focused network that focuses on identity and payments.
Very brief intro of you, Jaya, maybe?
Sure. I'm Jaya. I'm part of the core team at NIM. Absolute pleasure to be here. For me, this session is particularly interesting because actually one of the motivations of doing Shipyard was to try to bring together a little bit, not just kind of the thinking that's happening in NIM, but also the thinking and building that's happening elsewhere in the Web3 space, particularly the crews that we're already partnering with through the Universal Privacy Alliance, such as Railgun and Manta. To actually start fleshing out what is the state of privacy primitives today. So how far have we actually come when it comes to developing a real alternative in Web3 that enables people to kind of pick up the privacy primitives, build amazing applications for end users that then therefore do not have to think about all the complicated privacy problems that exist online. So for that reason, yeah, I think this session is a really excellent one. It's very nice to step outside of the kind of let's say the bubble of NIM and the work that we're trying to do on layer 0, and look a little bit more at some of the other layers.
Can I be the intern on this session? So I want to ask Jay, what primitives are, because many people who are just watching us might not know the term primitives, and you mentioned also layer 0, so we might want to steer the conversation towards these directions.
I mean, the way to think about primitives is building blocks. Building blocks is another good word for it. So something that is presents a kind of like neatly packaged, well thought through building block that someone else can then kind of pick up. It's like the way to think about it is like the foundation stones. So in order for you to kind of like build some wonderful new architectures in cyberspace that ordinary people can move through without worrying about their security, about their integrity, about attacks, about profiling and targeting. The foundation building blocks for those wonderful architectures is kind of what we refer to when we say primitives. So things that developers and people that are building these apps and these digital spaces can pick up and plug into and use fairly easily. What I think that's particularly interesting about privacy primitives in terms of when we're talking about advanced cryptography and privacy more generally in the Web3 space is that we're talking about like quite powerful and extremely technically complex things that I think we're only just like we haven't even scraped the surface of what could potentially be unleashed here when these types of very powerful privacy protections and privacy building blocks essentially start to be used more easily and understood more easily by ordinary developers. So when we're talking about layer 0, which is what NIM addresses, here we're talking about the ability to mix. We're talking about onion encryption and the ability to mix traffic in a very big anonymity set, and that anonymity set is essentially something that would be very hard for an individual app developer to achieve, but they can then plug into that very easily by using the NIM architecture. And so we're talking about kind of building very, very powerful building blocks that are maturing and becoming available for ordinary devs, and it's building blocks that look, especially when it comes to kind of ZK stuff, it's building blocks that actually enable things that are pretty much outside of the ordinary imagination of most people, I would say. So yeah, I think we're kind of on course for some extremely interesting times.
Could I ask you, Kenny, what building blocks, what primitives you're involved with around Manta, and how to imagine those maybe?
Yeah, sure. So I think that some of the more, I guess, categorically primitive things that we're working on are more so around the L2 side. And this is because what we're doing is that we realize that a lot of projects, a lot of work going on, whether it's in privacy or in other aspects that can all touch on ZK, is very much reinventing the same wheel, right? Like everyone's essentially building the same circuits for private payments, for private voting, for private identity, et cetera, et cetera. And so, instead of continuing that way, because it is quite a friction, everyone's wasting the same resources on the same thing. It's almost like a proof of work sort of incentive style. But so instead of that, we've essentially designed general use case circuits that can be applied to various different use cases. And so this is something that I guess is more so what would be categorically on the primitive side for us, just to enable developers to focus more so on deriving more value for their application in a shorter amount of time, rather than having to kind of build everything from scratch and essentially build the same circuits that everyone else is already doing. Yeah.
Thank you. And Ellen, could you relate to the primitive or the building block side? Where does Railgun exist in this space?
Yeah, so the whole goal back when this project was started in late 2020 was to build a smart contract-based privacy solution that would exist in current ecosystems that don't have privacy baked into the base layer. So places like Ethereum, Polygon, Binance Smart Chain, etc., Arbitrum, and other L2s, we could take and have a smart contract system that allows you to effectively do a private wallet. And so we got to work on this in 2020, or I guess 21 more accurately, and built some SDKs around these really complex smart contracts that allow other developers to take and integrate this into their tech stack. So in other words, we have a smart contract that's pretty cool. It allows you to have a balance of tokens that are private. And since it's just another smart contract in the ecosystem, you could do like arbitrary contract calls back and forth from it, right? So to developers, it's going to be really easy to integrate something like this. And so, to Kenny's point, to take and like build privacy into an app is incredibly complicated. And so, sort of on a different side of the same coin, we're trying to do all the complexities with people who are contributing to this project, and then building a really easy to use SDK for people who are doing things like stablecoin minting, for example. So if you want to take and do a stablecoin project, you could take and integrate Railgun and have it such that users can mint this stablecoin from their private balance. And I think that's kind of the attack angle that we've been researching now for, it's crazy to think, but almost 3 years. But boy, time flies when you're having fun.
Moving on to a bit of a different topic when it comes to privacy. Obviously, I'm very self-aware of the fact that I'm in this a bit of an echo chamber of privacy. I think that's true of all of us. But if you had to try to step out of it, what would you say the state of privacy is today in Web3? So I would say, from where I'm sitting, I see an increasing demand for privacy, not only in Web3, but also in general. And also I see increasing scrutiny by state actors and regulators when it comes to privacy-preserving tech, especially private transactions. How do you guys feel about this? So Kenny, what would you say, what's the state of privacy today in Web3?
Yeah, good question. So I think that it's still very hard to get the general audience to really care enough about privacy. And when I say general audience, I mean specifically Web3 audience, which is already not a general audience. And so it's kind of ironic. But within that category, the general audience, I think, in order to really bring and adopt privacy, it's not really something that I personally feel is the responsibility of the user, right? Like, it's just like, there's this concept in UI UX design where, like, every single button that you simplify requires, like, a bunch of other steps in the back end that you have to build out. And I think it's the same with, like, enabling privacy for user safety, user security, in the sense that I think it's more so on the application developer's responsibility, right? To be able to seamlessly integrate this feature directly into whatever sort of value they're trying to deliver to the user. And at the end of the day, I don't know if the user should really know the difference there. And so do I feel like, there's momentum building for that? I do. I do feel like, abstracting away all the complexity of building the circuits by hand and stuff is also kind of a step to get there, because, Solidity developers aren't engineers, right? Like, smart contract developers, decentralized application not engineers, cryptographers. I'm sorry, I'm jet lagged. They're not cryptographers, right? And so it's a whole different ball game when it comes to building a circuit versus building a smart contract. And trying to be a master of both is extremely hard, extremely difficult. And at the end of the day, when you're a master of both, what we're seeing right now is everyone's still building the same things. And so instead of focusing all the time on actually learning the cryptography, why not just build those valuable apps that at the end of the day users really care about and users want to use. And so I do think it's the responsibility of the application developer rather than like the individual users that need to particularly care about privacy on a daily basis.
Jaya, I know you have something to say about this. I know you that much by now. So you want to jump in?
Sure. Well, I completely agree with Kenny. Like, I don't think this is not something that end users should care about. However, I do think that end users are starting to care more and more about it. And I think we can see kind of, but it like they care about privacy in a little bit of a kind of like vague, fluffy way. It's like a background anxiety. And I think the difficulty for us is that we don't want to kind of like you don't want to scare people into using privacy preserving technologies, right? Like there's enough scary things in the world right now. Like, my God, there's a lot of scary things happening in the world right now. So if like you base your communications on like trying to like guilt trip people and scare people into using privacy because, you know, ooh, otherwise, you know, they're gonna come get you, is like, that's a bit of a problem, and it is anxiety provoking because it is a complicated problem to solve. Like there's so many ways that data leaks in digital infrastructure, right? Everything from the device to layer 0 to the application layer to browser windows. Like there's a lot going on, and I think it's a challenge for people who do work on this on a day-to-day basis, like us, to kind of hold back and not kind of overwhelm people with just how much is going on here. And exactly kind of just do the work and then arrive at the point where you're actually enabling people to go about doing their day-to-day things that they're trying to achieve, but in a way that where they can feel more confident, more secure, and potentially with some new functionality that's opened up due to, you know, nice new kind of cryptographic schemes. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think, like, you know, for me, the reason why I think it's interesting to start looking at how mature privacy primitives have got in Web3 is exactly to try and get an assessment of like, okay, you know, how far have we got to like reach the final point where we can just like provide the glossy finished product, or the finished glossy finished SDK, let's say, to developers that can then kind of plug in and use these things. On the other hand, so yeah, there's anxiety around privacy, so therefore there is somewhat of demand for privacy, I would say. Like, I think there's a lot of clues that we can see out there. So like big tech is definitely starting to put privacy at the core of their advertising campaigns. So, you know, there is the awareness of this issue is massively on the rise, you know, everything from popular Netflix series to whatever else. But empowering people to feel like that problem can be solved is like a whole other matter. In Web3 specifically, you know, one thing that I've noticed is that there is regular interest in UPA coming through, right? UPA being the Universal Privacy Alliance. So there seems to be quite a lot of privacy projects that keep popping up in Web3. Whether that actually, you know, how many of those actually survive and become something, and whether there's like enough demand within the Web3 ecosystem is another question. Sometimes I wonder whether the new projects that are popping up around privacy come to Web3 or are as Web3 projects exactly for the economics of it, which I think is an interesting thing. Maybe we can go into that later, but that's a separate topic. Yeah, so a bit of an all-round answer there, but I think there is a rising demand for privacy. There's a rising awareness around it. But it's an issue that, you know, because we're so used to having some level of privacy in physical reality, the consciousness of the lack of privacy in digital reality is something that people are only just catching up to, and it's becoming a bit of a kind of vague boogeyman in the room.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to interject here because, like, you know, you were talking about the users really starting to care, and I think it's this weird phenomenon where, you know, people don't think they really care about privacy, but then at the same time, when they're using like MetaMask, they probably have like, you know, 5, 6, 10 different wallet addresses. And I often ask the same question when I'm like doing a talk or something. I just ask, how many of you guys have MetaMask? How many of you guys, you know, have more than one wallet address? Why do you have more than one wallet address, right? And the answer is, oh, because I don't want people to figure out all this stuff about me.
Yeah,
so, you know, people feel like they don't care, or they don't know they care. You know, it's just like this dissociated level of ignorance of whether or not they care about the privacy side.
I wanna ask Ellen about something that Jaya said. How she put it, the glossy finish. Where are we in relation to the glossy finish? Do you think any of the privacy tech that we currently have in the Web3 space is even near the glossy finish, or is it a long way to go until we have mature stuff that actually a lot of people can use?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. I think we're definitely well on the way. I remember reading like some pretty smart people's writings in 2017 around like ZK, and it being like incredibly difficult to do it for like EVM. And now we kind of look at it, and there's projects like Tornado Cash that came along and did a really early version of like privacy on on Ethereum, and then we have like pretty advanced ZK EVM type chains that exist, right? But I think we're still like very early days, and I kind of to think about it from like a finance analog. Maybe like credit cards would be like a good example of it. Like the first credit cards that ever existed, or like credit type systems that existed, were like in the 1950s. And it took until like the mid 80s. It took a whole 35 years basically for credit cards to even start to get any traction. And even places like Japan, like they're still not like wholly adopted. Once you get out of Tokyo, you start to get into the boonies of Japan. It gets to get really difficult. You better carry some cash with you. And so I think that like the adoption cycle for this stuff will be a lot more crunched, just like all things are in the Internet of Things, right? But I think we're still pretty far away from it being like really glossy finish. To me, my opinion of glossy finish, at least in my opinion of things, I'd love to hear if people disagree with me, but is like buying something on Amazon. Like you do like the swipe to buy now, and then it like magically appears at your door like 24 to 48 hours later, like anything you can imagine. Like, and it's trivial. It's extremely easy. My grandmother can do it. I don't have to explain to her what a gas token is or something like this, right? I can't imagine trying to explain to somebody how to provide liquidity on Uniswap who isn't deep in the weeds of crypto. And so like the answer in short, I think, is no. I don't think that we're there, but I think on the other side of it, like a lot of ground has been made in between now and maybe 5-6 years ago. So for example, Zcash did NU5, which is really cool. For people who don't know, they did a new zero knowledge type system that doesn't need a trusted setup. I think we'd need a whole different space to talk about that. But suffice it to say, like they made it more secure than it's ever been, right? We have like new recursive technologies. There's a lot of code bases that are coming out that are making things easier to use, like Manta, for example, building out these like SDKs so people don't have to do circuits. This stuff is wildly complicated, right? And so like in the cryptography of things, like from like a tech nerd looking out, there's been a huge amount of progress that never before was possible. Even if you were doing a trusted setup 5-6 years ago, it was wildly complex and incredibly difficult. But now the KZG trusted setup thing for Ethereum was like type some stuff on your keyboard and wiggle your mouse around, and that'll be the entropy for the circuit. And it's like all these things, like they're really great advancements, but in terms of it being something that like the end user that I define as like my mom, maybe, I think we're, I don't know, 5 years, if not a decade away from that.
I'm hoping we can get to a glossy finish that's maybe glossy on the kind of front end the way that Amazon does, but not reproduce Amazon's back end, which is
minus all the AWS like stuff, like
exactly, and all the AWS stuff, and also all the kind of pseudo slave labor of actual humans that happens to
sure,
kind of
I just mean from like a technical perspective. I could like one button. I mean, like even things like signing with your wallet is still wildly complicated and introduces a lot of foot guns that people don't understand, right? I mean, so like I think people who say like that they're building things for the average person are wildly delusional, or like or probably lying to themselves at this point. I think that we're very much so far away from that. Like I mean, we're seeing like a move in that direction. There's some wallets out there that are making things easier. I think there was one Valora or something like this, where like you can take and do something very like Cash App similar, where you have somebody's phone number and then you could send them money just like you would with something like PayPal or Cash App and these sort of things. And so like we're seeing like little specks and like twinkles of these kind of things. And then you have like the account abstraction EIP that just dropped for Ethereum, so people maybe don't have to have ETH all the time to do transactions, which is a wildly weird thing that most people wouldn't understand if they're not in crypto. And so like we're definitely making progress in that, but it's still not in a state where like I would tell my mom like, you know, throw Chase Bank out of the window, like you don't need it anymore, like come on into crypto land. I think we're still not quite there yet.
And just to emphasize what you're saying, Alan, since you mentioned the credit cards being around since the 60s or something, I've just seen this video online about 1993, people reacting for the first card terminal in Burger King. And they cannot believe. And it's completely useless. Why would anyone pay in Burger King with a card? You know, it's absurd. So it's a 30-year long span of becoming, you know, mass adopted by the average Burger King purchaser person.
Right.
So compared to that, I think seeing how some of Latin American McDonald's accepting Lightning, for example, or these small merchants accepting Bitcoin payments in Costa Rica, that's already a lot faster. But I have one question. We have a good question from someone on the Element. But before that, I would really want to ask, because Kenny mentioned the UX, and Alan, you also mentioned making, you know, easy to use building blocks for developers. So there's a bit of a contradiction when it comes to user experience and privacy, because the less we know about the users, the harder it is to create good user experience. So the less private the experience is, the easier it is to create a more personalized experience. So how do you tackle, or what's your ideas on how to sort of address this challenge in terms of making privacy work for everyone? How to simplify the UX while keeping the underlying stuff private?
In my opinion, this is partially propaganda by by the surveillance industry, that you need to know everything about everybody in order to provide a good service. I just simply don't think that's true. You can run user testing in other ways, and also like some basic analytics, you know, can be gathered in ways that are privacy preserving. Yeah, that would be my kind of like very short answer.
Well, I think a lot of that tech didn't really, I mean, like the mechanisms with which like the internet really caught traction was through like marketing, right? Like I'm going to get a bunch of eyes to this website, so you pay me for ads is kind of like the core concept of like the internet. Now there's like a bunch of different spins on that, right? But that's fundamentally been the thing. And like what you're talking about, like being able to do it in like a blinded, maybe in like some, you know, homomorphic encryption standard that exists today, I think definitely should be pressed a lot harder. But we're kind of like victims of like economics in a way, right? Where people are like, hey, like I want to make money off of this thing. And like the only way that people have come up with like making money on the internet is like through ads or paying to not be advertised to, it seems to be, are like the two like core ways that, you know, we've sort of, you know, made money on the internet. I think that maybe like there's some primitives in like the Web3 world, or there's some ways in the Web3 world that people are, you know, entertaining and testing out to try to like make it such that like you don't have to do advertisements. But I still think that's pretty, it's still pretty early days for that too.
I like half agree with what Alan is saying, but I feel like that's like skipping the first iteration of the internet, which was really totally not about advertising or even commerce. It was simply about like publishing stuff to the world, like the kind of hello world vibes, where it was like, here's stuff I'm interested in, I want to share it with people, and that was it. The kind of heavy marketing drive and the kind of ad-based stuff came a little bit later in Web 2. And that's where I think the kind of economics of, you know, scraping people's user data really became ingrained as the core kind of business model of the internet. I very much do have hopes for Web3 of being able to transform part of that business model and kind of introduce some different economics into the dynamics. Partially because I also think it's core to why, you know, when you think about it, like the amount of brains and innovation that gets sucked into trying to figure out, you know, tiny microscopic details of how can we get people just a little bit more addicted to scrolling, or how can we just get people to spend a few more seconds on this platform, a few more eyeballs on this kind of advertising. It's a little bit like, man, we have better problems, or more important problems, more pressing problems in the world for excellent engineers to be solving than that. So I'm hoping that we can transform the business model so that the incentives are not geared, fully towards like just capturing people's attention and getting them addicted to specific platforms.
Actually, this brings us to one of the questions that I wanted to ask all of you very nicely, because Jaya mentioned commerce, right? So in the earliest versions of the internet, there was no commerce. It was a very different place than what it is today. Part of the reason for that is because we didn't have TLS. So TLS was, as far as if I remember correctly, it was the first encrypted browsing protocol. So it opened up this whole unexpected world of new possibilities on the internet that just weren't there before. So TLS ended up bringing us commerce. Otherwise, commerce would not have happened on the internet. And basically, no one saw this coming. It just happened once the possibility was there for us to browse privately with strong encryption. So in a similar way, I would like to think a little bit about what a private Web3 would enable compared to what it is today. If our visions, combined visions of various different elements of this privacy vision that we have coming into fruition and also getting widespread adoption, what would that enable that is not there today? Kenny, you want to riff on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that really draws me in, or drew me into, I guess, blockchain in general, was the fact that it's borderless, right? I think that that's something that we were hoping for the current, I guess, iteration of the internet. But we see, especially right now, it is very much, politicized, not just in terms of media, but in terms of, you as an online organization, who can you interact with? Who can you not interact with? And the answer to that depends on which country you're headquartered in. That's for reasons why, there's a Chinese version of Facebook. There's a reason why, Russian users can't use certain websites, made by US companies. And so I think like we're kind of taking a step backwards in globalization in the current trend of the internet that exists today. And I'm hoping that using Web3, we're able to reverse that trend and really gear towards more of a globalizational sentiment, because I don't think the everyday person really, is so offended by interacting with, Chinese applications if it derives them value. The Russian person working in the US who wants to send money home, right? I know that's a very outlier sort of example compared to where everyone else is sending money and stuff. But at the same time, right, like it's currently the use of the internet is very much limited and impeded by a policy that is outside of the individual's control. Without privacy in Web3, I think there's no change in that. Because at the end of the day, you're still able to monitor, you're still able to sanction, you're still able to do all these things that take the power away from the individual and concentrate it in whatever sort of grander agenda you, as an institution, as a government, as whatever you may be, decides to pursue, whether or not that's at the interest of the individual. And so I think like with a privacy enabled Web3, you really do get that individual level empowerment that you otherwise wouldn't be able to capture in what already exists in the internet today.
Yeah, I really like that thought. And I'm wondering also, I'll be curious actually to hear both what Alan and Kenny think about this. It's something I've been kind of like thinking a little bit about for a while, is like the more subtle effects of how a lack of privacy allows for a kind of creates a kind of targeting and profiling that can exacerbate a lot of there's been a lot of talk about like, echo chambers in social media and, how kind of people, antagonistic situations can become even more antagonistic because there is this kind of like weird effect where, you spread where people get kind of, let's say social media platforms are incentivized to get people reacting and that sort of thing. So I wonder if there's also a kind of more subtle effect of having very strong privacy, that when you cannot algorithmically target and profile people as easily, it changes, it maybe even changes the qualitative aspects of dialogue and social media behavior as a result. And that's something that I'm personally quite interested in seeing how that dynamic might play out.
I think it's both good and bad, right? Like, because at the same time, you get to give the same liberties to people who want to abuse it versus, you know, people who want to use it to freely express themselves. I think, you know, one example of this in sort of the Web2 space, or just like, I don't even know if it's called Web2, but like, I used to work at this AI company. I used to work at this AI company in China that, you know, did a lot of business with China. And so it made me very much think about what I do every single day while I'm in China, because everywhere I look, my company's cameras are on every street corner, and I know what those cameras are capable of. And they very much change my behavior and how I interact with things and people and behave myself on a daily basis. And I think it's the same thing in Web3. I know that, you know, especially when, you know, the concept of governance first came out and everyone was really hot on it. And you know, it's still a fairly hot theme, but you know, it's also very much the dynamics of voting is very different when you can see exactly what everyone is voting for, right? I talk with a lot of sort of DeFi projects that have worked on, you know, on-chain governance and, you know, getting proposals pushed through. And they've talked to their users, their community, and people are scared to vote their true feelings sometimes because they're worried that the community is going to, you know, lash out at that, or, you know, somehow react in a way that they don't want, and that impacts their actual, you know, their representation. And so I do think it definitely has a lot of impact, if positive impact, if people are able to more freely express themselves in a private manner. But at the same time, you know, the people who do want to abuse it, I think, you know, for prime example is like internet trolls, right? They are able to abuse others because they hide behind anonymity. And so there's definitely, you know, a balance.
Yeah,
there's definitely like a give and take on that. I think like the challenge is like there's kind of like a coming to head of like the state of the union around privacy. Like we see like VPN adoption has been like on the rise by like almost like it's viral. And I think it's like ironic. There was like this really funny study on Forbes. I was trying to find the link earlier so I could like drop it in your guys' DM so you could see it, because like the number one reason why people like wanted to use VPNs was to like to use like Netflix like for streaming services. Like, oh, my favorite show is on Hulu, just a hop of IP address away, you know? And so it was like this weird like cloak and dagger. Like people kind of almost like vicariously care about privacy. They don't recognize it that it's like privacy, but you know, it kind of has like these privacy elements to it. But I think like the frequent like push from like you know, governments, especially I'm US based, I follow US politics pretty reasonably closely, is and I, you know, maybe kind of come off as like tinfoil hat, but you know, I'm starting to see like a lot of like you know, papers coming out of places that are, at least in my opinion, pretty toxic, and they're really difficult to argue against because they're justified under the guise of like getting the bad guy, right? And I think that like the bad guy is pretty few and far between, and really tramples on a lot of people who deserve privacy and need it for security. And so like to Kenny's point when he was talking about governance, I don't vote in governance because I don't want people to know what my wallet is. I really care about privacy, and it's really quite difficult to like take and execute a transaction on Ethereum without like reducing your pseudonymous set, if you will, right? And so that's like one of the biggest challenges. And so like I don't want my financial data. I don't care if people know how I vote, like on some sort of like MakerDAO governance or something like this. But I do care if people, you know, get to like pry into all of my DeFi habits and all of the dumb NFTs that I lost money on, and all of the, you know, on-chain options protocols that I was speculating on in, you know, 2019 or whatever, right? That's none of their business. And so like, I think that like we have to really kind of, deal with that like headbutt where it is like people who are in authority kind of see it as like it's a net negative. And I feel like things like the UPA are going to be really cool, over the coming years as like we start to see like more and more of these, to me, net negative policies against privacy start to creep up out of places like FinCEN and OFAC and the like.
We have quite a few pretty fun community questions, so maybe let's get into those for the remaining few minutes. The first one is from Fishkin. Thanks for the question. You talked about problems in transforming sophisticated cryptography into consumable SDKs for developers. What about leveraging cooperation with Anoma and Aleo, who are working in that direction and are part of the Universal Privacy Alliance? This person did their homework. Jaya, maybe you?
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, we love the guys at Aleo and Anoma. And in fact, they might very well be joining for some sessions later on in Shipyard. So stay tuned. We have some surprise guests coming up. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really important to see a lot of collaboration, just like in collaboration in general. Kenny hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of people working on arguably like if it's a Venn diagram, they're pretty damn overlapped on a lot of protocols that are out there working on privacy in the ecosystem. And so like I think like collaboration is really quite important. And like I don't think we have to like fight over the same very, very small pie. Like we should instead like try to see like how we all can work together and create like an ecosystem of people who are working on privacy for the better. And so I think I would love to see a lot more of that. And I think we are starting to see some of that, especially around like various like zero knowledge primitives. So for example, like dealing with like recursion and EVM is a bit of a challenge. And so like there's some people doing research across different protocols, like how do we take and make it easier for on-chain smart contract type stuff like Railgun? How do we do that and make it easier for us to use that? I think another thing that we've started doing that I've been really fond of is going to different hackathons around the world and like getting people involved with the SDKs with various bounties. And so we've participated in a hackathon in Amsterdam pretty recently, and then another in Rome, Italy. Great if anybody's listening from Italy, love your country. And it's really cool to like get that feedback from developers on like using this tech stack. It's really critical. It's like live testing, if you will, like because we can see as people are trying to integrate this in person live, like where are the hiccups? Like what are the parts that people aren't understanding? Are there holes in the documentation? Is it hard to set up tests around this kind of thing? And I think that's like super, super valuable. So above and beyond like the collaboration from people like in different protocols, I think like getting out there and like getting people who don't have like any understanding of privacy or aren't building privacy on a day-to-day basis involved and like seeing just how hard it is to work with. And Railgun definitely has some room to improve on the SDKs, and I'm excited to like get that feedback from people all around the world.
Kenny, I'd love you to riff on this next one. I think it's a really good question, actually. Can you explain about zero knowledge in a simple way? I researched it before, but they show the different explanation and example. So people have a bit of a difficult time understanding ZK. What's your simplest take at ZK?
Yeah, sure. So I think the biggest confusion that people have is that ZK is not a technology. It's not something that is, you build ZK code. It's more so a practice. It's a philosophy, I guess, lack of a better term. It's just any sort of way that you can prove something without revealing the information that you're trying to prove, right? So, for example, if you know a password, right, you can prove that you know the password without revealing your password by simply typing in the password, and then you get to the other screen, right? And so it's essentially almost like you're doing a zero knowledge proof every time you type in your password to an email address. And so anytime you are just trying to prove something without revealing that information, right, like that's just a zero knowledge proof. The implementations of zero knowledge proofs, especially in, I guess, the blockchain sentiment, is around either Starks or Snarks. These are kind of like the two main ways of proving in zero knowledge. And they all come with their drawbacks, right? Starks are the main difference, I guess, it's still debatable, but Starks are a lot faster. They generate a lot faster. The proofs are generated a lot faster because they are larger. They're not as optimized. So if you want to take something like this big and shrink it into something this big or this small, right? Like it takes time, it takes energy in a physical form, but it takes computation power in a digital form. And so the Starks are just like, you know what, maybe we don't have to shrink it all. We can just like keep it this big and then like shoot them out fast, right? Whereas Snarks, it's not, well, I guess it's debatable still, but like the whole stereotype is that they're not as fast to generate because there is that level of compression that is involved. And so, that's just the difference between a ZK Stark and a ZK Snark. But just the idea of ZK itself can be anything along the lines of trying to prove something without revealing that information.
I think it's a really good explanation. Jaya, anything to add there? I saw you jumped on the unmute button.
Well, I think given that we're kind of talking in the context of privacy here, I think it is worth noting that like, and following on from ZK Starks and Snarks, explain the difference there. There is actually a lot of ZK implementations that have more to do with scalability than privacy, strictly speaking. So when it comes to implementation of ZK, like if you don't know anything and you just see like ZK, it doesn't necessarily mean that like it's a kind of privacy preserving system or a system that has privacy at its heart. Sometimes it is, or a lot of the times it is more about scaling otherwise quite complex systems and a lot of information as it goes on chain. Yeah, I mean, there's so much more we could talk about when it comes to zero knowledge. I'm personally really fascinated by the history and some of the kind of thinking going forward. I think for last year's Shipyard Academy, I did a talk that went a little bit into this because I have this kind of sneaky feeling that zero knowledge is going to be used to privacy wash systems of control that we otherwise see from surveillance today. So what I mean by that is like, when you enable computation on private data, you might be hiding it from the eyes of humans, so to speak, but it's still being computed by, the eyes of machines, I guess is a kind of nice analogy, and therefore can still be used in, forms of targeting and systems of control that we understand from surveillance today. So that to me, that's something that is like worth keeping an eye on, is something that I'm trying to kind of flesh out a little bit more and understand whether this is actually the direction that things are going in.
Before I let Alan riff on the same, if you have anything to add, sir, please, Salazar, can you find the link to Jaya's presentation from last year? It was Lecture 5 of Shipyard Academy. Just drop a link to in chat to for those who are interested. Alan, floor is yours.
Oh man, I don't know. Zero knowledge is like really hard to explain, but my favorite thing that cryptographer that I know, Hisham, he worked on some Railgun stuff. He said it was like, I want you to know that I know what I know without telling you what I know. And I was like, okay, I'll try to digest that. It's definitely like a really interesting thing. I think like the whole like the easiest way that I've been able to successfully explain it to my mom was just that like whenever you go to Starbucks or something like this and you order a coffee and then you do that weird dance with your card where you're trying to figure out if you like insert it or tap it or like swipe it. After you do whichever one it happens to require, it just says like approved, right, on the little InGen code terminal, and then like the barista hands you your coffee and you go about your business. This is like a very quasi like zero knowledge thing that happened, right? All the barista knows is that you had at least enough money to pay for your coffee. They don't know like if you have $100 in your in your bank account, or if you have $10,000, or maybe like how much does Starbucks cost? I make my coffee at home, but like maybe you had a penny more than that. No one knows. Yeah, it's a lot.
You're right. You're pretty much in the ballpark.
Somewhere between $10 to $1,000 for your coffee. But suffice it to say, that's kind of like my very easy explanation of zero knowledge. And yeah, shout out to Hisham on the whole like I want you to know that I know what I know without telling you what I know thing, because that's good zero knowledge pun right there.
It is definitely. Well, okay, so what I really love about Alan's analogy or story here of paying at Starbucks is that to me that's like it's such a perfect kind of story to capture, the expectation of zero knowledge. It's like when we pay for something in our ordinary physical lives, we pay for it assuming that like the barista shouldn't have to know all these things about us. They shouldn't have to know,
It's none of their business.
It's none of their business, right? And so like people have this kind of natural assumption or natural kind of expectation of a certain level of privacy, which isn't even a kind of conscious expectation because it's just so normal from the physical world, right? But the problem is that, again, taking Alan's example, actually, if you're paying with a credit card, it's not private at all. So it might be zero knowledge vis-a-vis the barista, but it's not zero knowledge vis-a-vis your bank and all the payment intermediaries, right? So like you've got a whole back end here where zero knowledge has not been implemented. So when we're here as privacy projects, we're actually here to kind of rectify that, to say like actually the back end needs to represent the same expectations that we have from the physical reality. And that's why zero knowledge, as a kind of, zero knowledge cryptography is so interesting, because it's literally taking the expectations, the relations that we're used to from our ordinary lives and implementing it into, our technical architectures, which currently do not do that, right? It reveals way too much to all the payment providers, the banks, all the intermediaries.
Yeah, it takes that like surface level expectation and runs it clear down to like the base of it. So
exactly. Yeah.
It's definitely something that's important.
Right, I think that's all we had time for. I'm going to be doing the outro soon, but that's because our dear co-host here, Hux, has a hard stop at 0:00. Do you want to talk a little bit about your hard stop, Hux?
Yeah, a bit of promotion never hurts. So I'm going to be hosting a squad workshop session right after this one. For those who ever watching this stream and thinking about forming a squad during Shipyard, do tune in.
Or joining one.
Sorry? Or yeah, already started one. Yeah. Or joining one, or yeah. So just tune in for that. It's going to be AMA like chatting with Mikola and myself about what do we expect from you guys and what are some tips that we can give at this point. Yeah, and I guess that's what that's what I have to jump off at exactly 0:00 from this beautiful conversation. I would have had like so many cool questions. I just didn't want to stop the flow, but maybe another later time I jump on a Twitter space somewhere and just throw in my questions to this audience. Yeah. Thank you though, Alan and Kenny and Jaya. It was super fantastic listening to you.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Kenny. Thanks, Sudo Hux, for hosting.
I would second that, but don't leave just yet. I will have one more final question for you guys during my outro. Maybe Hux will not be here for that. So first of all, a really huge thanks for making this, Alan and Kenny. And hopefully we can bring at some point Evan back as well, who had some technical difficulties. It was a really fabulous conversation. It's always good to hang out with fellow UPA members. It was really, really fun. Now, Salazar, can you please share my screen to show the secret phrase for today? Yeah, so as a tradition, we always share a secret phrase as part of these lectures and masterclasses and fireside chats, and this is what you can use to unlock your POAP for this event to prove that you've attended. So it's also a tradition that I always ask our participants what this phrase means to them. So maybe let's riff on that a little bit. Why is Universal Privacy Alliance related to this chat today, and why do you guys find it important? Kenny, go first.
Yeah, it's related to this chat today because we're all in the UPA. And then why do I find it important? I think that despite the fact that the users themselves don't have to touch privacy on a day-to-day basis, or at least I don't think they do. At the end of the day, it still needs to be there in some underlying manner, just sort of like the infrastructure, right? Like whether it's, you turn on your lights and you flip the switch and your lights turn on, right? I think it's just something that needs to be there in order to provide all the things that we talked about today in terms of self-expression, in terms of personal safety, in terms of, you know, none of your business, right? All these things. And so I think like it's all important, and someone's gotta make it happen. And so I'm glad it's the UPA.
Alan?
Yeah, I mean, Kenny hit the nail on the head. I think that privacy is something that we really need to be considering as we sort of like digitize society, and it's happening really, really quickly. We're doing it pretty fast, and there's a lot of ramifications to not having privacy. You know, even if you're of the cloth that says I don't have anything to hide, and I can totally let the world know everything about me. Perhaps that's not the case for everyone around the world, right? And so we have to really be considerate of like the I guess the theater in which we live throughout the world. And I'm really excited to see some of the things that the UPA does around engagement with you know, courts, policymakers, regulators, and things like this, but especially in the U.S. That's something that I care a lot about. As a U.S. citizen, because I see some things that are really pushing against privacy for really unfortunate strawmen, and I think that we have to have a unified front to, you know, really educate people on like how privacy works, why it works, and you know why it's good for commerce, for national security, and all the cool things that governments care about. And I'm really stoked that we have an alliance that can do that.
Jaya, any closing thoughts?
No, just what Kenny and Alan said.
That's so easy. Good one.
Yeah, it's
Right,
all
so-
been said. It's all been said. Yeah, a pleasure to chat with everyone again. Looking forward to next time.
Once again, huge thanks for joining, everyone. Just to round off my my intro, what you need to do to claim the POAP, you need to go to this link over here and enter the secret phrase. Why is it so hard to say every single time? Secret phrase, Universal Privacy Alliance, with the same spelling, all in one word. But you only have 15 minutes for this. And then, of course, the next steps, like we said, Hux is going to be hosting a workshop on squads. So if you're thinking about joining one or creating one, then make sure to join it, because you're also going to be able to see a proto squad and what other people thought about when it comes to building a squad. Also, don't forget that this Saturday, tomorrow, the exam is coming. So good luck with that. Hopefully you've done the homework and watched all the lectures. And you're going to do just fine and ace that exam. That's basically it for this week, unless you're joining the squad lecture. A link to it was, or not lecture, sorry, a workshop. A link to it was shared in the chat. It's a Jitsi link, so make sure to join. And once again, huge thanks for all of our participants for coming on. And have a lovely weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a nice weekend, guys. Thank you.
Ciao,
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 ciao.
Thanks, guys.